This is the Marketing Podcast Network.
Welcome to Uncorking a Story, the podcast that introduces you to the rich world of storytellers who share their personal journeys, creative processes, and the stories behind their stories, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Mike Carlin, and I'm thrilled to be part of your writing journey. If you're an aspiring writer, a literary enthusiast, or simply someone who believes in the transformative power of words, you've come to the right place. Every week, we'll pop the cork on the world of successful storytellers and give you a healthy pour of inspiration, insight, and empowerment. My mission is to help writers like you realize your full potential through the transformative and therapeutic power of writing. Whether you're just starting your literary voyage or looking to refine your craft, I'm here to provide you with the knowledge, inspiration, and encouragement you need to embark on your own storytelling adventure. So, are you ready to uncork your story and let your creativity flow? Uncorking a Story is about to begin. Sit back, relax, and let the transformative magic of storytelling whisk you away. Welcome to Uncorking a Story. Christina Bacicieri is a fan of all things magic and grew up on a steady diet of fantasy novels and pasta supplied by her loving grandmother. She studied marketing at the University of Texas at San Antonio before working as a business relationship consultant and project manager. She joins me on Uncorking a Story to discuss The Last Refuge, the debut novel in her Stealing Sanctuary series. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Christina.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you here, Christina. I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
Yeah, so it kind of in my bio says it. I started becoming a storyteller at my grandma's kitchen table. So I spent a ton of time with her. So she's Italian, she was Italian, and she loved to cook. So I would sit on the counter and chat with her. We would just share stories. She would always take me to the library. And when I started grade school, it was discovered that I am dyslexic. So I did struggle with reading, but I had the luck to work with a reading specialist, and that specialized attention made me fall in love with story. So that really made the entirety of grade school, middle school, high school, I was obsessed with story. And in college, I decided to go the marketing route because it was creative and it felt safe. Looking back now, I probably could have gone that creative writing route, but I stuck to marketing. And it wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I had the dream about this story. And I realized I had to write it. And looking back now, I think all the pieces were there, that I've always been a storyteller, but it took my grandma she was in remission with cancer, but she got sick again. And COVID hit, and it made me realize that I needed to take a hard look at my life and decide I actually wanted to make some changes and do what was calling to me. And that's always been writing and telling stories.
Yeah, I want to dig into that, but I also have to dig into the Italian grandmother. That's one thing we share in common.
Oh, nice.
My mother is 100% Italian, and my grandmother was interesting. She was born in the United States, but then her family emigrated back to Italy in the early probably 1910s, and then they came back. So her siblings were actually born in Italy. And she was born here, but was pretty much raised in Italy. And I, like you, had many memories of sitting around a table cooking with her when I was really, really young, making struffoli or making whatever. Because I have a twin brother who was in and out of the hospital quite a bit. So when he would, get sick, my mother would be in the hospital with him. My grandmother would come and take care of the rest of us. And those just the best memories of my life were just learning how to make a tomato sauce when I was 5 years old.
Yes, there's something, it's beautiful. There's something about an Italian grandmother's love and how she somehow puts it in the food. My brother always would say her chicken soup could regrow an arm. I think it's just that love from them and the willingness to share a meal and make food with you. My life would not be the same without my grandma and cooking. I get excited about food. So that is something I don't know if you do. When you share a meal with somebody, my life revolves around food, happy moments.
Oh,
and
I
think that's all from her.
Just two quick things. I have to address the chicken soup thing.
Yes.
My grandmother made a homemade chicken soup. She'd always make it with pastina. And and it was, oh, of course. And it was like you see, your brother says it could regrow an arm. To me, it could regrow a head. Like it was
Yes.
and to this day, it's like one of my top 5 favorite meals like on the planet.
Yes.
Like I don't
Yes.
need a fancy steak
No.
or anything.
Nope.
A bowl of homemade chicken soup, I'd be happier than a
Yes.
clam.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I do enjoy cooking. Last year, I had big plans to make a bolognese sauce,
Oh,
and
wow.
that's like a 4 or 5 hour thing because
It's
you do it in stages.
yeah.
And I went to the movies with some friends, and my wife decided to start the sauce. And I came home, and she's like, "Well, I know I wanted to do you a favor, so
Yeah.
I started
Yeah.
the sauce, and to the point where all I had to do was like add the milk at the end." And
Uh-huh.
I hate to say it, and I'm embarrassed by it, but I fucking lost it. Like I'm
Oh
like,
no.
how could you do that to me? Like it was like
Yeah.
I'm like I was.
What did you do to my sauce?
I'm like, but I was
Yeah.
looking forward, and there's a specific way I like to do things too. Like,
Yes.
it's,
Yeah.
and I was
Yeah.
just like, and it like it was like a 3-day argument. Like, it was-
Yes. Yeah. We were like, this is so sweet. Let's do it together next time. Let's do it as a team.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's something about cooking. It's very it's like spiritual. There's
Yeah.
something really precious about it. And I think it's really cool too that your family, because my grandma was the firstborn over here, and her family's from Italy, and my grandpa was born in Italy. So it is really cool just having that heritage and that love of food. And in the best of times, sharing it with people. So
Right.
it's like, do it as a team.
Right.
Let's do it together. Yeah.
So you go to school, you study marketing, you start working in marketing, and then you pivot. You decide, hey, it's time for me to you focus on my calling. What was that pivot like? How did you navigate kind of taking that big leap? Because I've worked in marketing for 27 years. I know that there's a lot more money in marketing and a lot more safety in marketing than there is in writing books. So how did you navigate that transition?
So I was really lucky. So I have a partner who believes in my dream. And for me, it was really interesting because I was in a project management job, and it was during the time of COVID. My grandma was sick again. And I just knew those factors were making me really unhappy. But this job that was on the trajectory to make 6 figures, it was not fulfilling me. I was not happy. And I knew that I was trying to cram myself inside a box that just wasn't fitting. And I decided, all right, I'm going to take a step back, even if it's just for a few years. I have saved. I'm going to take a step back and pursue this writing dream. And even if that means I go back to some type of, now that I've done so many things in writing, I feel like I could go back into a writing aspect of business, but I will never force myself into a job where I'm unhappy again. And like I said, I had that dream about the book. And I just knew that I think what I say is like magic finds us in our darkest times. And I think for me, going through what I went through with my grandma, and she's such an integral part of who I am, I think it just found me at the right time. And I just knew, like, it was terrifying. It was terrifying to quit a stable job. But I think I realized I have to prioritize like my mental health and what's best for me. And writing the story was what I did. And looking back, it's like, that's so scary, but it was the best thing I ever could have done. So
I'm curious to learn more about this dream because I do believe our subconscious does offer us gifts if
Yes.
we're paying attention to them. So what can you share with us about that aspect of this?
Yeah, so I always say that I'm very lucky because I have like lucid dreams. I think it's kind of close to right before I wake up, I'll realize I'm dreaming, and I ask people all the time, "Wait, you can't fly in your dreams?" They're like, "No, I write emails." Like I don't do that. So I had this dream, and I was like behind Kira's shoulder, and I saw it was like a line of people crossing a border into this place and then changing into magical beings. And I woke up and I had to write it down. And I knew from there, it's this magical world. When you cross this threshold, you turn into a magical creature. And so for me, that's where the story all started, was that dream. And I do have a lot of dreams. This is a trilogy, so I'm working on book 2 now, but I had another dream about witches. I'm like, wait your turn. I'm like, wait your turn. Like, I got to finish this first. So
I'm curious, had your grandmother passed by the time you had that dream?
Yeah, so I had the dream first and started writing the story. I told her about the book. The book wasn't finished by the time she passed, but she knew I was writing it, and I told her all about it. I remember one of the last times I saw her was in the hospital, and she had this burst of energy. She looked beautiful. And I was telling her about the story. She was so happy. She never got to read it, but I did dedicate it to her. So the dedication is to her. And it's really, she reminded me that even though the ones we love are gone, they are always with us. And, you know, I think when we write stories, that connection is always going to be really strong, and they live in the story. And I say, like, pieces of Kira, the fierceness, the compassion definitely come from her, because she was the sweetest person. But if you ever said anything against the family, then grandma could be, I mean, you rarely ever, but if you, that's when I only ever heard her cuss if somebody said anything against the family, or ever saw her get mad if she was defending the family. So I think a lot of Kira comes from that strength and that compassion.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah.
There's a story my sister tells me. She and my older brother, who unfortunately has since passed, but got to go to Italy with my grandmother. So my twin brother and I never had that opportunity. We never got to go on that trip. My other siblings are much older than us. And there was a story where they were somewhere, I think in Rome, and you know, it was my grandmother and these two American kids, and like there were these Italian men who said something very derogatory towards my siblings in Italian, not realizing that Maria was fluent, and she turns around and gives them a tongue lashing. They had no idea what hit them. And it's just such a, but she had that fierceness too, like sweetest woman in the world, but do not get that woman angry.
Nope, don't, because that family is everything. That's the thing about the beautiful thing about an Italian grandmother, is that unconditional love. Like, no matter what, they love you. They're gonna see the best in you. And if anybody says horrible, mean things about you, they're gonna be there. They have your back.
Yeah.
So
that is true.
Yeah.
That is true. Well, what can you tell us about the book? What can you share with us?
Yeah. So The Last Refuge is about 16-year-old Kira Van Dyer, who's committed the worst possible infraction when she's trespassed over the border into Edabon, which is the last refuge for magic on her planet of Atera. And to conceal her crime from the all-powerful ruling board and escape the site's warden, Kira will have to use her strange new powers to battle for her freedom or die trying. And really, the book is about there's found family, magical creatures, but it's also about self-discovery and a strong female heroine. I really think for me, it was a love letter back to my 16-year-old self. And I think also right now, I think a story of hope and finding yourself, and it's okay to be different. That's really the heart of the story, is that hope. So
yeah, very, very cool. Very cool. And you mentioned that it's going to be a trilogy. So it sounds like you are kind of into book number 2 right now. I'm curious, like the difference in your writing, your approach to writing book 2 versus book 1. What did you learn during the process of book 1 that you're applying to book 2?
That's a really good question, because I will say for book 1, because I started handwriting it because I wasn't sure just when I very first started where it was going to go. I hadn't even considered publication, and I was a pantster. It just came to me and I wrote. I'm still a discovery writer at heart, but now I plot, because the chaos that ensues for me and my brain when I just try to pants thing, I still, again, like I'll plot things out. And if the character just doesn't want to do that, I'll let the character do what they want. But now I have completely plotted out books 2 and 3, and I've written the final scene for book 3. So I think that has really helped me. I have like a guiding compass of where I'm going. Whereas in book 1, it was just kind of a free for all. You probably can see behind me, I also use visual aids now, and that helps immensely. So.
Yeah, you know, I know people have different opinions on plotting and outlining. I find it to be very helpful. My first book was completely, you know, you say pantser, I think it's a great title, or a great term, and it took me years. And then I started outlining, and I was instantly resistant because I like to discover as I write too, because that's how readers, you know, I figured it would bring a little bit more authenticity. But if you kind of know where you're going, it's a little bit more of an efficient process. And then, like you, I realized that, hey, even though this is how I thought it was going to go, I know that I've got the flexibility in individual scenes and chapters to take a left turn when I thought I was going to make a right. So it keeps that level of, kind of fun in there. I also love the notion of you having the last scene written, or the last, like, knowing how it ends, and now but you still have to figure out how to get there.
Right. Right. So it doesn't, I totally agree with you. It doesn't take the fun out of it. And I think for me, there was in the first book, it was thousands of words I just deleted because it ended up not working. And so it may even happen, again, but I think for me, I was like, okay, I'm going to plot. And so hopefully that won't happen again. If it does, it does. But I think that has been so much easier this time because I have the direction and where I'm going. And then I can still play with the fun things like, oh, this is a different character I wasn't anticipating, throw them in. And, I just know that is where we're going. And we recently, I don't know if you had a chance to see the eclipse, but with the eclipse happening, that's a really big symbol in my story. And that's like the penultimate scene right before the ending of the third book is going to happen during an eclipse. And I was like, well, I have to write that scene. I can't not write that scene. I've just lived it. So, and felt that kind of eerie feeling that it's a mix between eerie and beautiful when you're sitting in an eclipse and it's daylight and then it just goes dark.
Yeah.
And I just had to write the final scene. So I just knew it was like, well, that's pretty much the universe telling me, write the scene now. And then you will have a direction to go in for book 2 and 3, and it won't be as chaotic as book number 1.
Yeah, I was actually in Texas that weekend in Austin for a wedding.
Yeah.
My niece got married that weekend.
Congratulations.
And that Monday was the eclipse, and we had flown home on Sunday. So I think it was like 89% covered here. So it really got a little darker, but not like completely dark. But I know in Texas it was a bit more celestial.
Oh, it was just like daylight, and then it was like going all dark, and then like the outside lights coming on, and it was just incredible. I just think it's really beautiful, and it's so quiet. Like the birds were like, what? And the crickets, everything was totally silent. So, and it's weird because it's beautiful and it feels kind of heavy. Yeah. And it makes sense why it's such they say it's a time of reflection, and that totally makes sense why it is a time of reflection, because it's like everything was light. You have this moment that's just complete darkness. And I think I can run with a metaphor all day long. So I love light and dark. So I was like, wow, because that's a lot of what my stories hold is light and dark, and choice, because I think that's the beautiful thing is like there's these light and dark elements in choice. So it was just cool experiencing that. And then it going, because even before I knew that we were going to have that total eclipse here, I had wanted an eclipse in the story, and I have it on the cover. It's going to be on all the covers. So I was like, well, that's an interesting coincidence that I experienced a total eclipse and know what that's like.
Yeah.
So.
Well, tell me about your path to publication. What was that road like after you're done with book 1 and you want to get it out into the world? Just share with us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I had so here in Texas, actually, we have what's called the WLT, which is they're the Writers League of Texas. And I was trying to decide if I wanted to go traditional or indie. And I decided, okay, I'm going to go to the Agents and Editors Conference and just kind of pick everybody's brain before I make the decision. And it was really fun. I met a lot of authors who had gone through the querying process, and apparently they call it querying hell, and that is really intense. I was like, thank you for your honesty. So they were very honest about it. And I met with 2 wonderful agents, and they were very excited about the story premise, but they were also very honest. Like, this is likely the trajectory of how many years it's going to take and the process of it. And I think for me, I really wanted the story. I was ready for the story to be out there because it meant so much to me because of my grandmother. And so I decided, I had learned about platforms like Readsy, where you can get in contact with cover artist editors that work with both indie and traditionally published. And I thought, I'm just going to go it alone for this first one and see what it's like. And it has been a lot of work forming, all of these different elements of a business, but has been really incredible, and the readers have been amazing, and I'm obsessed with my cover artist. So that was one of the most incredible parts of the process, was seeing the book come to life. But yeah, it's been tough. I will say anybody who, even if you go traditional publish, writing a story is tough. it's definitely rewarding. It is so incredible when you're done to see how far you've come and what you've done and all these thousands of words that you put your heart into. So I will say, all in all, it's been a lot of work, but I'm really glad that I did it.
Yeah. So I'm curious to know,
Mm-hmm.
since you do have that background in marketing, and I
Mm-hmm.
think launching a book, independently is like launching a business, because you're building a product. You have to kind of put a package together, right? So that's the book cover. You actually have to have the product. That's the story, and eventually the book. Then you've got to market it. You've got to get it into distribution. So it's a classic marketing problem. How did your background in marketing help you with, if at all, with this process?
Yeah, it's such a great question, because it's funny. You look back at life and you think all the kind of the breadcrumbs come together. And I do think that the fact that I did end up with a marketing degree and project management and all of that under my belt has helped so much, because I think without knowing how to at least even do the research to find, okay, where do I want to find an editor? Where do I want to find these things? And taking classes, because one of the things that I did was there's a course called Publish and Thrive, which is so great. Sarah Cannon puts it on, and I learned how to put like my story into formatting and to hire a formatter, and then also all the different aspects of setting up with vendors. And I think if I hadn't had that also marketing background to think, okay, I want to create a website and figure out social media, because social media can be really terrifying. But I knew that you can have an incredible product that you've worked years on. You have to be able to get it into the hands of readers. And there's just so much out there. So I really do think that marketing background and the project management helped me find the avenues and the channels to get the book where it's at now. Like I learned about, I don't know if you've ever heard of BookBub, but they're an incredible newsletter. And I just was able to get connected with them. And it's a game changer, because BookBub can get your book out to all these different readers. And I don't think I would have known how to do the research, because the publishing landscape, I think it's gotten a lot better, but it's kind of like a hush hush business where they used to make it really hard for you to find these resources. But now you can pretty much create an indie book that is beautiful and is just like a traditionally published book. So I think I do appreciate my education when it comes to that aspect of everything.
Yeah, I know BookBub is very selective. I mean, they do not take every submission that they get. So if you can get in with them, it is a massive platform for indie authors. So.
Yeah.
So I do have a few non-book related questions for you, which, I always like to get to know my guests a little bit more through pop culture. And I'm curious, when you were growing up, Christina, what were some of your favorite things to watch on TV?
Oh, so I loved Sabrina the Teenage Witch. No surprise there. It's funny, back in my day, like Pokemon was really all the rage, and that had a resurgence, which I think is really fun now, being like, hey, like that wasn't as cool back when I was a kid. And then also, funny enough, Price is Right. Me, my brother, and cousins would watch it with my grandma, and we loved Price is Right, which is so funny, but yeah.
Hell yeah. I mean, I remember just as a kid, that show's been on forever. If I was home from school sick, it was Bob Barker and The Price is Right.
So
like
great.
That was like the one thing that I always looked forward to. That's right. I have to ask about Sabrina. Did you watch the sort of the reboot, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina?
I have not watched it yet, but I'm so excited. I'm a big chicken. So,
it's dark.
But it looks dark. So good. Yes. Yes.
But it's got
so
I don't know the actress's name. I just call her Sally Draper because she was in Mad Men. But I tried to watch it with my daughter, and we got there like halfway through season 1, and I'm like, man, this is a lot darker than like the Melissa Joan Hart show that I.
Yes. I saw that, and I was like, it looks very cool. But I'm also, again, like I can do zombies, but when you get into ghosts and those kinds of things, I'm like.
It was like, it's like the Antichrist is heavily involved. And I'm like, I don't know if I should be watching this. Like, it's scary. Could be opening a door.
Scary. Yes. Yeah. And it's like, they looks like they did an incredible job. I'm like, maybe I'll watch them very slowly during the day, like at 12 noon so I can process before I go to bed. Because if I watch scary stuff, I dream about it. So I have to be really I have to be really careful. So
Yeah, you do have that vivid dream,
yes,
those vivid
yeah.
dreams. How about music? What did you like listening to?
It's so funny. I was thinking about this, and my first CD I ever bought myself was Taylor Swift because I know, and she's become such a powerful, strong woman. So the journey, but that was the first CD that I ever bought by myself. I also listened to the Beatles. My grandma loved the Beatles and oldies, so in her car we would listen to a lot of that. But yeah, so trying to think. I mean, Britney Spears and Spice Girls was really all the rage when I was young. But I think I was more an oldies with my grandma kind of person.
Very cool.
So yeah,
Do you have a favorite Beatle or favorite Beatles song?
Here Comes the Sun. Yeah,
Oh, that's a good one.
yeah,
That's a good one.
yeah.
I was a George Harrison guy, so anything he did, I loved. I loved, While My Guitar Gently Weeps,
Oh,
Something in the Way. He was by far my favorite Beatle. I'm not sure if it was the Transcendental Meditation or what, but he,
very cool.
he just kind
You're
of
very peaceful.
he just kind of spoke to me a little bit.
Yep, have that
Um,
energy.
what about advice you would offer to someone out there who's working on their first manuscript, or maybe their third manuscript, or
Yeah,
but hasn't been published yet? What advice would you give an aspiring author?
I would say remember what you're writing for. I heard this advice from another author, and they were saying there's going to be high highs and low lows during this process. And I think the goalpost is always moving for authors. And if you can remember the reason you got into writing and what motivated you, all of that external validation, the goalpost moving, the burnout, it's so much easier to manage because you'll remember the core reason that lit you up to write the story, like why this story came to you. And for me, that's a dedication page to my grandma. So when I do get frustrating moments or you get a bad review, I think it really falls away because you remember, well, I was writing this as a story that was for me and for her. And so I think if you have that goal in mind, if you keep the goal in mind of what you're writing the story for, all of those other things, while they'll still be hard, I think it'll be a lot more manageable because you'll be grounded in yourself and your reason for doing this.
Yeah, it's so true. And bad reviews will happen. Not
Yeah,
100% of people are going to love
it's
everything you
art.
do, and
Right.
if you are pleasing everybody, it's like, well, maybe you're not saying enough. You maybe you're not saying something
Exactly.
strong enough. So,
Yeah. And in
um,
art, you never will. I think
yeah.
that's the beauty of art is it is this part of you, but it goes out to others and then they can make up their mind about it. And really if you put everything into creating this piece of art, I think you can freely let it go and know like it's never going to be perfect. Nothing we create is ever going to be, we're not AI and that's great. So nothing we create, even they can't create something perfect. So
Hey, look,
it's never going to be perfect.
I use
Yeah.
AI all the time to help me
Yeah.
with my show notes, and it's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
It does save me time, but it's
Hmm.
definitely not perfect. You can't.
Right.
It won't ever tell a great story. It can tell a good story,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah.
something that's really going to move you. So,
Exactly.
very cool. Well, my big question, always sort of the most daunting one, is if you could jump into a time machine
Hmm.
and go back and talk to the younger Christina. What would you tell your
Hmm.
younger self? Maybe it's that little girl who's sitting with her grandmother cooking at the table and dreaming up stories. What would you whisper into your younger self's ear?
I would probably say your voice matters. And even though sometimes your wild imagination can make you feel different, it's going to take you to some really cool places. And don't be afraid to use that voice. And so I think for me, I think anybody who feels different, you can sometimes make yourself quiet and invisible. But I would say don't be afraid to take up space because when you start to take up space and say what's on your mind and in your heart, it gives other people the permission, I think, too, to see that it's okay to speak up and be yourself and make change. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's what I'd say to her.
I think it's so interesting. Like when we're kids, it's like I remember this, like my own kids. I've got three; they're in their 20s now.
Wow.
But it's
Yeah.
like when they were really young, they'd all get together. They put
Hmm.
on shows. They would
Yep.
just be completely vulnerable in front of everybody and just
Yes.
have so much fun with creative play. Then
Right.
something happens. They start going to school. All that stuff
Yeah.
goes away,
Right.
and there's like they're afraid to be vulnerable. And I think so much of
Yes.
being a good storyteller is embracing vulnerability, because you're putting something in the world that is going to be judged somehow. But to know that your voice matters and to kind of let that carry you through it, I think is fantastic advice for your younger self. So thank you for sharing it with us.
Yeah, of course.
Christina, I imagine there's some people out here who want to get to know you a little bit more. Do you have a website or social media that you can point people to?
Yeah, I do. So the website is ChristinaBacilieri.com. And then on Instagram, the handle is Christina Bacilieri. And then TikTok, it's Christina Bacilieri author. And it's very Italian. So there's a lot of I's in there at ease. So
very cool. I'll be sure to put all of those in the show notes so people can find you easily, as well as links to where they could buy the book online. Christina, thank you so much for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Thank you, Mike. It's been a pleasure. It's been really fun.